Here with Tim Phillips, the president of Americans for Prosperity. This is one of these independent groups you've heard about, funded by people who really like free markets and therefore are not appreciated much by a lot of the media. But you are bound to be, as you were in 2010, a fairly active force in this year's political debates. You're an independent group, and mainly you're on the free market team, going after big government interventions in the economy. What are the issues, the economic issues, that you see resonating with voters and likely to get a lot of your attention this year?
First and foremost is spending. You know, this president and most of the liberals in Congress have spent us into oblivion. We know the deficits and debt that are being piled up, and this is the issue that's kind of been forgotten a little bit. But didn't they need to do this
to get us out of the ditch?
That's right. And it worked so well, didn't it?
That's what I keep hearing.
The stimulus worked so well. That unemployment really didn't go above 8, right? Everything they told us that you could believe. But that's the issue. The spending issue has kind of been hidden and quiet in recent months, but we're going to keep pounding on it because we have got to get spending under control. We know, frankly, that President Obama is vulnerable on this issue. Voters do not like what he's done in jacking up spending. There's a brand new poll out today that shows that from ABC News. And the second big issue for us is the regulatory assault, this job-killing assault from the EPA and from the NLRB and all the other alphabet soup
National Labor Relations Board. This was the group that at one point was telling a Boeing company that it couldn't open up production in South Carolina.
That's
eventually struck a deal with the company.
It's the same bureaucratic decision-making process that stopped the Keystone Pipeline. You know, that's an issue that in the old days, 10, 15, 20 years ago, would have been insider. Citizens would never have really gotten that issue. It's a different world now. The 24/7 news cycle, this electorate does pay more attention. And I'm telling you, that decision by this president to cave into the environmental lobby on the left and to deny us the energy we need that would have cut prices is going to be a disaster for this administration.
Okay, so you're saying a lot of people know what it is, but just for those who don't, this would have been the pipeline running, basically carrying crude oil from Canada and parts of the northern United States down to where it can be refined in the southern United States, rejected by the Obama administration. And are you saying that the average voter is now linking this decision, which, as you said, could seem like kind of a beltway argument, but they're now linking that decision to gas prices?
They are. They absolutely are. Voters, citizens across this country, and this is good news, they are paying more attention these days and they are better educated on the issues. That's one of the most positive things we've seen from social media, the explosion there, internet related, and from the 24/7 news cycle. That's a good thing, and it is. They are now getting the fact that this president's decisions, again, caving into an environmental lobby that's too radical, well beyond anything that the public supports, caving into their agenda, it means that they're going to have less oil coming in to be refined. That will then mean gas prices are not going to go down. Okay. They get that. Voters get that.
Now, this is interesting because we saw a lot of congressional Democrats in the House lose their seats in part in 2010 because in 2009 they had supported cap and trade environmental regulation. Now, they might have thought that issue, they'd kind of taken their lumps on the environment, but the Keystone Pipeline, there's also been issues with green energy companies like Solyndra not exactly working out after getting
You mean government picking winners and losers for their ideology is not a good idea? No, it's not.
But these issues, kind of the cluster of energy issues, bigger than they were in 2010? Almost as big? What do you...
Bigger. The most dramatic public policy issue change in the last decade, and I would argue in modern political history, has been the change from the public kind of nodding and going, okay, if the environmental lobby believes something, it's probably okay to go ahead and do this stuff that's happening. The public now knows that the environmental assault of the last 2 decades has been terrible for energy being able to be created in this country or produced in this country. It's meant higher gas prices. It's meant lost jobs. The public gets that. They're now with us on the free market side of the environmental issues. That, James, is the most dramatic public policy reversal among the electorate, among the greater citizenry of this country, I would argue, in modern political history.
Okay, another very dramatic public policy change was 2010, the passage of Obamacare, the president's signature health care reform. It's been interesting to me, I think to a lot of us, observing how this, what was a lot of anger among a lot of Americans at the time it was passed, has not abated. I know Dan Henninger, we're going to talk to more in a moment, has written about how this is really what gets the Santorum crowd excited, is opposition to Obamacare. Are you seeing that same phenomenon in your polls, and is that likely to be a big issue for you as you get involved in various races this fall?
Yes and yes. 2 years into Obamacare, 2 years after passage of this legislation, a higher percentage of American citizens oppose it and want to see it repealed than when the legislation was actually passed, which again is unprecedented, I believe, for a big social welfare program. For it to be less popular 2 years after passage and before the most onerous provisions kick in. You know, we're going to see the dramatic increases in health insurance costs and the spending that's going to blow the deficit up even higher. That's going to get much worse in 2013, 2014. So citizens are more opposed to this terrible legislation now than when it passed. And all of the disastrous provisions aren't even in effect yet. So it's going to get worse for them. It's going to be a big problem for President Obama and senators and House Democrats who voted for this legislation this fall. The Supreme Court, we talked about this earlier, are hearing this case, oral arguments March 26, 27, 28. I know at Americans for Prosperity, we're doing a big rally in Washington on the 27th because we want to remind American citizens what this legislation did, how it was crammed through by an arrogant Congress under then Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Majority Leader Harry Reid and President Obama.
But it's probably, for President Obama, if he cares only about being reelected, probably good for him if the Supreme Court knocks it out completely. I mean, that's not a prediction, but I'm saying if the court were to...
It is so politically unpopular, this legislation. Ironically, it would help him politically if it were completely overturned. Now, look, we still want the right thing to happen, which in our view is overturning this legislation, which we think is unconstitutional, regardless of any political consequences for anyone. But I think, ironically, it probably would help him politically.
Okay, now, I wanted to ask you also about Senate races. Now, you're not specifically endorsing candidates. You tend to do issue ads, informing voters.
That's right.
And generally, as I said, promoting smaller government, going after politicians who have voted for higher taxes, higher regulation. You're obviously watching the Senate very closely. 53-47 today in favor of the Democrats, but they're defending a lot of seats, 23 seats this fall, either Democrat or independents who caucus with Democrats. What are you expecting? 53-47 today in favor of Democrats. Come next January, what do you anticipate?
Well, James, you ask all the easy questions. That's a tough one. I think that if President Obama either loses narrowly or wins narrowly, so either one, I'm not making a prediction there, but I think if he wins narrowly or loses narrowly, I think you'll see the Senate flip to Republicans. That's just my personal opinion. I think if President Obama were to win a large victory, then I think that the Democrats would hold the United States Senate. I think it's likely, though, that no matter who wins this race, it'll be close.
Okay, and as far as the close loss or close victory, that's what you're expecting too?
I do. I think the country, this country, I think they like President Obama personally. He is a likable person, and I mean that without any sense of understatement. I think that it's his economic policies that give great pause to many Americans. They are concerned about the spending deficits and debt. They don't like the health care takeover, Obamacare that he passed. So they have great concerns about his economic policy. But I think they like him personally.
So I think all in, we're getting a prediction of a Republican Senate next year.
I think so.